Welcome back to the live desk at the George W. Bush Presidential Center's Forum on Leadership. I'm your host, Kevin Sullivan. We spent the last couple of hours tuning into a panel on next-gen leadership, moderated by Barbara Bush, and a panel on governing in the 21st century with the governors of Colorado and New Mexico. If you missed them, we'll post a video in the next hour or so at bushcenter.org. Up next, we get to hear from some of our guests who have participated in panel discussions this morning. Joining us now is Diana Mao, a 2015 Presidential Leadership Scholar and the president and co-founder of NOMI Network. Diana participated in our Next Gen panel this morning. Diana, welcome back to the Bush Center, and great to see you. Tell us, it was a great panel. What were your key takeaways that you thought from that discussion?
Yeah, I think my key takeaways are millennials are doing amazing things. Despite media and public perception, right. And Barbara with Global Health Corps and many others on that panel, I really have a deeper sense of not just inspiration, but that we can address some of the most complicated issues of our time, and particularly the influencers in our lives. Like for Barbara, it was her grandmother, right. And then also for James and myself as well. So really seeing that torch being passed on and wisdom being imparted was one of my key takeaways, among many other things.
Right, and you said you hope a headline 10 years from now is that millennials rock.
Yes, exactly. We've changed the world and we rock, and we're not the selfie generation taking photos of ourselves all the time.
What do you wish people knew about millennials that go beyond the stereotype?
You know, I think, I'm sure you've heard of Larry Fink from
right.
BlackRock, his recent statement around encouraging corporations to be more socially responsible, and also to be more long-term minded as opposed to short-sighted. And so I think that call to action was driven by millennials, because millennials, we don't just care about where the products are made. We care about who makes them. We care about their stories. We care, we're very inquisitive, and we really push the systems, particularly corporations, that are studying the purchasing patterns of millennials. So I think we have a huge kind of lever in terms of our behavior patterns and, you know, the wealth that will be transferred over to millennials in the next decade.
Tell us about your work with the NOMI Network that you started.
Yeah, so I started NOMI in my early 20s after a heartbreaking situation in Cambodia, where a single father with 7 children, as I mentioned during the panel, offered my male colleague his youngest daughter, and I was with him, and so that broke my heart. But then I also met Nomi, who is a survivor of sex trafficking. She was 8 years old when she was sold by her stepfather. Actually, she was younger. She was at the shelter at the age of 8.
Wow.
So that moved me to start my organization and name it after her. Synonymous for Nomi, Know My Story, Know My Success, that her past doesn't define her future, right. And that women and girls can have an opportunity and also work and start their own businesses.
And what kind of results are you driving?
So we're driving a lot of results around employment, savings, and women. Last year, we've impacted 3,500 between our fashion school and incubator in Cambodia, and also our rural training program in different trafficking hotspots areas in the north of India. And so now women are saving money, earnings, and starting their own businesses, as well as we're starting the process of placing them in jobs like hotel jobs at Marriott, and also ethical factory jobs at the largest factory in India.
It's hard to believe we're already at the 4th Presidential Leadership Scholars class that's going on right now. And you were a member of the inaugural class. Now, a few years later, when you reflect back on that experience in 2015, how did you benefit most, and what lessons did you learn through the program that you use in your work with NOMI today?
Yeah, so many lessons. First of all, being mentored by living presidents, President Bush, and learning just the art and science of leadership and also their struggles and challenges was really inspirational for me, running a small nonprofit at the time and really being able to imagine what the future could be and the large-scale change. But practically, my cohort of 59 peers, I was entering the program at a time where I was really discouraged. We were in startup stage. So, startup stage is just difficult and challenging, on top of being threatened by the local mafia in India, on top of murder case of a girl who was unfortunately raped and murdered in India. So that sense of real sorrow entering the program, and my peers encouraged me. Neil Grunberg even recommended his wife to join my board, and she's now on my board. And just that supportive network that we are making a collective impact, even though each one of us had our own vision of change, our own vision of what we would like to do to make a difference. Collectively, we help each other, we continue to stay in touch. And so that network is extremely powerful of leaders in all sectors.
One of the great things about the program is the network that is formed that lives on past year. It's not a one-year deal. So I'm glad to hear that. What next for you? You've started NOMI. You've had all these experiences. What do you see the next 4 or 5 years bringing for you and your work?
Yeah, so the next 4 or 5 years, I hope to really take our program to scale and reach 100,000 women, as well as see these hotspot trafficking areas shut down and a reduction of trafficking. But also for me personally, just looking at other areas where I can look at systems change, working closer with corporations as well on their supply chain is something that I'm starting to do and hope to get more involved with. And also imparting what I've learned to the next generation, Gen Zers, because they are, during the panel we also talked about millennials are being less relevant now. It's Gen Zers that we're looking at, and they're the ones that are, some of them making $60,000 per tweet, and carving out these new industries and jobs that don't exist. And now, so many Gen Zers want to be a social media influencer. So I think that's the power of millennials. We have to pass on just the social change that we want to see and really carry the torch forward.
How can people learn more about NOMI?
Well, visit our website and talk to me. I'm always available. And
NOMInetwork.org?
NOMInetwork.org. NOMI-network.org.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at the Live Desk. All the best to continue in this important work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Earlier today, I had the chance to speak with Governor Martinez. Take a look at that conversation now. Governor Martinez, thanks for joining us here at the Forum on Leadership Live Desk. It's great to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Over the last few years, of course, we've seen an incredible divide in the country, and the discourse has become tougher. New Mexico, the state you govern, is, I guess, what we would call a purple state. Yeah. So how have you managed to get things done? You've had a lot of success there. How have you done it, given the divide in the country and the political dialogue?
First and foremost, the entire time that I've been governor, since 2011, we have always had Democrat-controlled House and Senate, or both. Only one 2-year term did we have Republicans. And so every single bill that I sign is bipartisan. And so we have to communicate. We are able to get to know each other, create relationships, and really have that deep talk conversation that convinces the other side that this is something that is good for the people of New Mexico, that we shouldn't do it the politician way, that we should do it as leaders in doing what's best for the people that we serve.
And with that comes some fiscal challenges. How have you navigated those waters?
Unfortunately, when I took office, we had zero in the reserves, and we had a $5.9 billion budget with a $450 million deficit. And so what we did is, I think our budget actually reflects our priorities. Education, are we able to make sure that families are staying in our state? Are we diversifying our economy? And our budget did reflect that. But also, I had campaigned for 16 months and said, I will not raise the cost of you living here and raising your family here. There's a lot of waste in government if you're just willing to look at it. And we did. And so we balanced the budget like we're supposed to, didn't raise taxes, not once in the entire time that I've been governor. But we also have an enormously healthy reserve of 10%. Probably by the time I leave, may creep up to 13%. And we've also brought in big companies such as Facebook and SafeLight, and diversify that economy along with our energy sector and along with the military bases that we have in our state.
You've had a number of successes, and let's start with education, where you've made real progress in closing the achievement gap. How have you done that?
We had to concentrate on making sure that kids are reading. because from kindergarten to the third grade, you learn to read, and then from the third grade on, you are reading to learn. And so if you don't keep up with your grade level, you start to fall behind. And so when you fall behind, then you get discouraged, you don't go to school, you drop out. And I've seen what that looks like as a prosecutor. So we focused and put a lot of money into making sure our children are reading, keeping up with reading. We've had the highest graduation rate in the history of New Mexico. And in some, people will say because it's a poor district, Spanish is their first language. They have terrible government housing and or, where they live, it's single parenting. And I say that's not what encourages kids to learn. We have an area where their graduation rate last year was 86%. When I walked in, it was 43%. Awesome. But you have to focus your dollars. Don't just give them a whole pile of money and say, figure it out. Focus it on reading. Focus it on making sure that you're staying at grade level so that these kids are excited about going to school. So we've been successful. Sometimes we meet the challenges because the unions don't necessarily agree that is what makes it successful. However, the data is telling us that is what's making the difference.
Now, the getting those kids college ready and improving the graduation rate in high school has got to have played right into your job creation and economic growth efforts, right, in attracting the Safe Lights and the Facebooks of the world.
Absolutely. And kids, not all kids are going to go to college, and not all kids want to go to college, but there has to be something after graduating from high school. So we concentrated on vocational training, whether it be a certificate, whether it be a 2-year associate's degree, or going on to a 4-year institution. We've got to be able to offer opportunities that are different and fit that child. So now we have early college high schools. Those early college high schools provide internships. They provide the ability to earn a college credit while in high school. Therefore, you as a student don't have to pay for it because you're still in high school. So the state pays for it. But at the same time, they're able to get, for example, down the Southeast, be a welder, earn $85,000 with a certificate and a high school diploma, and earning really good money in the economy where we are energy rich. And so you have to have a variety of options, but we've got to get them out as 12th graders and not where they have to go into remedial training, because that's very expensive.
Now, the panel that you're on with Governor Hickenlooper is Governing in the 21st Century, which unfortunately means taking on the challenge of the opioid crisis and prescription drug abuse. How have you tackled that one?
Well, certainly we've recognized that we've had that for a long time. A lot of the drugs sometimes come across from the border of Mexico into the United States. However, when there are actually being prescribed opioids, the doctors have to register on a medical registration platform that we have in New Mexico so that patient isn't doctor shopping. So whomever that doctor is going to about give you 30 days worth of opioids, they can look up and see, have you been to another doctor and received opioids, and now we can tell you're abusing it. We've also put quite a bit of money into treatment. It's one of the most difficult, but we have put money through Medicaid dollars and have been able to tackle and actually starting to reduce the overdoses that are occurring in other states. We're reducing them in New Mexico. It was very scary there for a while, but we had to focus on how do we stop this.
Well, Governor Martinez, thank you so much for stopping by the live desk, and look forward to your panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Take care. That was New Mexico Governor Susana Martinez. She's active on her Facebook page, so if you'd like to learn more, check her out at Susana Martinez Fan on Facebook. Earlier today, I also had the chance to sit down with Governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper. Interesting conversation about how his entrepreneurial nature helped him as a public servant, and some interesting comments on how legalized recreational marijuana has worked out in Colorado. Let's check it out. Welcome, Governor Hickenlooper. Thanks for stopping by the live desk.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
You're an entrepreneur by nature, right?
By inclination, for sure.
You were way ahead of your time back in the mid-1980s, starting Colorado's first brew pub, First of all, we're here at the Forum on Leadership. What advice do you have for young entrepreneurs who might be out there watching our live stream about starting a business?
Well, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that don't know they're entrepreneurs. But if you're the guy who, I grew up outside Philadelphia, we'd get a big snowfall, and I would, go around to the neighbors' houses and negotiate how much they'd pay me if I shoveled their sidewalk. And then I had a couple other kids who would come, and I'd do the negotiations, they do the shoveling. And that was this kind of lesson that, hey, you don't have to do the heavy lifting. You can be part of the organizational team.
Right.
So I would advise people, A, to learn how business works. When you work get a summer job or working somewhere, talk to your boss. Ask questions. Learn about how do you measure the risk with an investment. If you're in a business and when you want to expand, how do you do that? And most bosses will sit and spend the time and explain it to you. That's as valuable as any schoolwork you're going to do.
How has that entrepreneurial nature served you in public office? First as the mayor of Denver and governor of Colorado.
Well, I ran for mayor in 2003, and I'd never run for anything. I never ran for student council or class president or dog catcher. It was the first time I ever ran for anything was when I ran for mayor of Denver. And, I didn't know anything about it, which is a liability. You can't make anything, you can't ignore that. But it also is what many voters find appealing. And that first campaign I ran against 4 lifetime public servants, talented, wonderful people with strong constituencies, but somehow I broke through as that person that was a fresh voice, and I was the one who was going to really take on and answer, many of the city questions and use common sense of business. And government isn't business, and you learn that pretty quick once you're in government, but there are a lot of the lessons that carry over from business and can help elected officials be more successful.
Talk a little bit about your approach and some of the innovations that you've brought to the office of governor and how that's helped you, break down some barriers and get some things accomplished.
Well, we tried to be transparent and open. As governor, we have a dashboard, so every agency we lay out what we're trying to get done, what our goals are for this month, what our goals are for the quarter, what our goals are for the year, so that public can begin to believe in government. And I think, Democrats and Republicans have for so long kind of fought over how big should government be, or how much should government do, where should it be, smaller, where should it be larger. But I think we all basically agree that government's got to work. And we should all make sure that our citizens believe in government, even as we're, debating and wrestling over, how do we make it a little smaller, or we want to expand and do this one program. And I think that's something sometimes people forget in the partisan battles we see now in Washington, that, hey, this is our country, this is our government, we should all be invested in making sure that it works.
Right. You called it the great social experiment when Colorado became the first state to legalize recreational marijuana. 30 states approximately have now followed suit. How's that worked out?
Well, I opposed the original public initiative to put legalized recreational marijuana in our Constitution. Didn't want to be in conflict with federal law. But, most of the fears that we had haven't come to pass. We haven't seen a spike in consumption. We haven't seen a dramatic increase in young people, teenagers using pot. Almost every brain scientist I talk to feels that this high THC marijuana has a high probability of, even when kids only use it once a week, taking a sliver of their long-term memory, because their brains are growing so rapidly in their teenage years. And that long-term memory is, that's intelligence, right?
Right.
So we pushed that real hard. But we didn't see a big increase in that. The only demographic we've seen a real increase is in senior citizens. And I think maybe that's, arthritis, the pains of getting older. Anyway, I still urge caution, because we're not sure what the unexpected consequences could be. The old system where we were sending, hundreds of thousands of kids every year to jail for nonviolent crimes, for having a hustle, right? They were buying and selling pot or something.
Right.
Now they're, there's all that under the counter commerce is now legal. It's getting taxed, and the tax money doesn't raise. No state, no city should ever do it for the tax revenue, right? We get $220 million of tax benefit from pot, and we're a $30 billion budget, $30 billion a year. So it's a rounding error. But that being said, it does allow you to market to kids the risk of marijuana. It does allow you to do things for people that have had, have gotten into real trouble with drugs, and it's expensive to get kids back on the right track. the tax money is useful for certain things that are hard to raise money for. So I urge other governors, I say, let's wait another couple of years and then we'll see.
The panel that you're on with Governor Martinez of New Mexico is on the challenges of governing in the 21st century. Give us a little sneak peek of what the themes you think could emerge from that conversation.
Well, part of it is social media and how toxic that can be, especially Facebook continues it's a kind of a warm environment for haters.
Right.
And if you're trying to get people to believe in government, that can make it very difficult. I'm sure we'll talk about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity I view as, it's the one thing where I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I worry. We are vulnerable right now and I don't think spending the resources to really make sure that we're thoroughly protected. So, these are fears that no one else ever had to worry about in the past.
Right. Finally, since it is the Forum on Leadership, who's the leader that inspired you, maybe from your business career or even, in your political life?
Well, it's funny, when I first came out to Colorado, I worked for an oil and gas company called Buckhorn Petroleum, and the president of that company was a guy named Bill Rader. And he was just rock solid, and he really was no nonsense, and there was no politics in the office. Everybody was on the same team. We're all going to go out and find oil and gas. And, he could be so strong and so firm, and yet, he listened to everybody. He was, I think, everybody's mentor. He left a big impression.
Right. Well, good deal. Well, thank you again for stopping by, and we'll look forward to your panel.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks, Governor. Earlier today, I sat down with Colonel Matt Amidon, Director of the Military Service Initiative here at the Bush Institute. He'll be speaking in a few minutes at the inaugural presentation of the Military Service Citation. Colonel Matt Amidon, thank you for stopping by the Forum on Leadership Live.
Thanks so much, Sully.
Great to have you.
Great to be here.
You've just announced the first class of the inaugural Stand To Veteran Leadership Program, a new leadership program at the Bush Institute. Tell us about that.
Well, the Veteran Leadership Initiative is, first of all, unique. We're very excited about this year because it's a great opportunity and it's aimed at those who are working right now to support our nation's veterans and their families. But they want to broaden their skill sets and increase their impact, and that's what the VLI, Veteran Leadership Initiative, is intended to do. But I'd like to take us back about 3 years and explain where it came from. We did a lot of work in the collective impact space. We went out there and tried to assess what right looks like. And so we had a lot of great information to inform everyone about how to be a better funder, how to be a better nonprofit, and how to be a better veteran as you're consuming these services. But we knew that wasn't enough. And there right now are multiple sectors, from banking to small town mayors to education to veteran serving nonprofits, that can positively impact today and tomorrow our nation's veterans. And that's what the Veteran Leadership Initiative will do. We've just welcomed 34 scholars into the inaugural class, but I wanted to highlight one, which will really highlight to you all what a compelling opportunity this is to help today's leaders develop into tomorrow's future leaders as well. Her name is Laila Koastani. Born in Kabul, Afghanistan, emigrated to the U.S. when she was 3. Now that's where the typical becomes the atypical. At 12 years old, it was planned for her to go back to Afghanistan for a planned marriage. And this is where the random application of luck and a caring and loving older brother changed her trajectory in life. He refused that to happen, and in fact ended up becoming her official guardian. She moved to San Diego to live with him. She became a naval surface warfare officer and now runs a very notable nonprofit where they teach cultural integration training. So basically, how best to understand what you may consider the other side. She's a wonderful scholar, and we're really looking forward to working with her.
You have the honor today of presenting the first Military Citation Award on behalf of President Bush.
That's right.
To Blaine Smith. Tell us about Blaine and why he's so deserving to be the first recipient.
2 words: continued leadership. Every year, Sully, 200,000 of our service members transition from military to civilian life. Blaine Smith has led on the battlefield, but he's also transitioned into the private sector where he was such a notable leader. The CEO of that company asked him to start, develop, lead, and instruct a leadership development program in corporate America. Blaine then took a shift and was the CFO, COO, and eventually executive director of one of the most impactful post 9/11 veteran-serving nonprofits today, Team Red, White, and Blue. Blaine then went back to the private sector where he's now CEO of Go Ruck. Most importantly, Blaine is a proud husband and father, but he is exactly that which we imagine when we think of a post 9/11 servant leader of character. And I'm deeply honored today to present him this citation.
It'll be a great moment.
Yeah.
Now, for our viewers here on the live stream, walk us through the work of the Military Service Initiative that you lead, and and you're an active, still on active duty as a Marine Reservist.
That's right. Yep.
So you're in both worlds, active duty and leading the work, the transition work that you do for our veterans.
I am a post 9/11 warrior. I'm a 26-year Marine. My wartime president was President Bush. He's now my ultimate boss. I've had the great honor to work here for 5 years. It's truly inspiring, and I think we all well know, this is a unique platform and we have unique abilities. And what the Military Service Initiative does, MSI, is we utilize that exactly to foster success in transition. And it seems so simple, and you begin to ask yourself, well, why is that work important? I firmly believe there are 3 imperatives to do so, and it's the moral and social that you so well understand. It's just the right thing to do, but this has 2 additional issues, and one is the national security imperative. Treating our all-volunteer force well is the imperative to sustain and preserve that force, because since 2001, 2.8 million service members have deployed overseas to Iraq or Afghanistan. But finally, and this is the tomorrow vision, this is an issue of global leadership and civic engagement. With the right transition, our men and women will come home. They will start businesses, they will be successful, and they will fill and lead critical roles in our economy and community. But MSI has taken that and those imperatives, and we really do focus on what we think are the 3 keys to success for transition, and those are just optimizing your health and well-being,
right,
and then leveraging meaningful educational and employment opportunities. That's where we focus our efforts, and we believe it's the right thing to do, but for the nation, it's the smart thing to do.
Right. Employment being maybe the #1 concern for most
That's right.
transitioning veterans, and then of course addressing the invisible wounds,
That's right.
which you've done a lot.
Yeah. So our 4 program areas that make up the Military Service Initiative. The first is health and well-being. We focus on the invisible wounds, but very simply, what we do is we find those in need, and we find them the right care at the right time through the Warrior Wellness Alliance. Our economic opportunity work isn't just about the next job, it's about the more important next career and the necessary steps to get there. And we do that through a tool called the Veteran Employment Transition Roadmap, which has been effective about fostering thinking about the transition before you take it. We just talked about the newly established Veteran Leadership Initiative,
right.
But what's of course near and dear to our heart is our Team 43 family. Our 143 alumni warriors in our sports programs, and what the Team 43 sports program does is purely highlights the service, sacrifice, and resilience of some of our most severely wounded, and we're so excited about that.
The role that sports can play in that transition.
Undoubtedly. Sports, activity, community,
right.
and belonging,
right.
Ultimately very important.
Now, I want to leave our viewers with this question. We see through the Team 43 sports program, we saw it certainly in the Portraits of Courage with the exhibit and the book, with all that President Bush did with so many veterans who came back for that. We see that he has this incredibly close relationship as their former commander-in-chief with these post 9/11 veterans. But why is that? What is it about him that has forged such a close relationship?
So first you hear the words. You hear him say he doesn't miss much about being president, but he very much misses being commander-in-chief. And saluting the women and men in uniform. As I mentioned, in 2001, I was on active duty. He was and is my wartime president. But he's also said he's going to dedicate the rest of his life to supporting veterans and families, and it is so incredibly true. When you get a chance to see him interact with this generation of proud warrior, the care, the loyalty, the affection is genuine and real from both President and Mrs. Bush, and we couldn't be more honored to have him as our wartime leader.
Well, Matt, congratulations on the great results that you're driving for our veterans, and thanks for stopping by the live
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Take care.
Up next, we have the Executive Director of the Bush Institute, my friend Holly Kuzmich. Thank you for joining us today, Holly.
Thanks for being here.
So before we preview the afternoon, what struck you so far about this amazing lineup of people that we've had here at the Forum on Leadership?
Well, I think one of the things that I've enjoyed the most is that we've had some of the graduates of our leadership programs here, and we've gotten to show the world who they are. Everybody attending the event, everybody who's able to watch the live stream, people like Diana Mao, who graduated from Presidential Leadership Scholars and is doing amazing things on human trafficking, and Ong John Mo, who's our graduate of our Liberty and Leadership Forum, who spoke last night. They just have tremendous stories, and our work has made a difference in their lives, and it's great that people have gotten to be able to meet them.
Yeah, it really is inspirational to hear them tell their stories. So what are you looking forward to this afternoon?
Well, this afternoon we're going to talk about one of the issues that is most near and dear to the heart of President Bush and to the work we do here at the Bush Institute, which is all about veterans and military families, and the hundreds of thousands of veterans who transition every year out of the military into civilian life. This is a topic we work on a lot here, and we're able to talk about some of those issues with our panel today.
Also coming up this afternoon are a couple of Studio 43 conversations about tech and about regenerative medicine. So
right.
Why are those important? Why are they on the?
Well, one of the things we wanted to be able to talk about were looking at those things that are going to transform our life in, 5 years, 10 years, and 50 years. And that's things like artificial intelligence, regenerative medicine, genetics. Things are changing so rapidly, and we want to be able to talk about some of the issues that we might not think about every day, but we know in 10 or 20 years are going to radically change how we live our lives.
We've had a number of our guests here at the Live Desk talk about the way they have been struck by President Bush's leadership style. You've worked for him for a long time. How has he molded you in the work that you do today?
Well, one of the reasons it's easy to work for him is he's clear in his principles. You understand what he cares about. There's no bones about it, right? He's pretty direct on that. And then he's really good at hiring and trusting people and delegating to them and not micromanaging. And so you want to work for a leader like that. And it's why I've continued to work for a leader like that. And a fun
guy to work for.
And a really fun guy to work for with a great sense of humor, which makes your job a lot easier when you can have fun.
Right. Well, Holly, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The exciting coming up next, we're going to take our live stream audience to the American Airlines Pavilion and the inaugural presentation of the Bush Institute Military Service Citation, an exciting award that'll be presented by Colonel Matt Amadon. So let's now go to the American Airlines Pavilion and keep following our live stream at bushcenter.org and on our YouTube and other social media channels. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and silence your cell phones. Our program will begin shortly. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chairman of the George W. Bush Foundation Board of Directors, Secretary Don Evans.
Good afternoon. I guess just still this morning, actually. Wow, welcome back to the American Airlines Pavilion. What I see when I look out there is a pavilion filled with friendships. And I can't tell you how much that means to us and your support. And I can just say with friendships like all of you and faith, you can accomplish a lot of great things. And we're certainly doing that here at the Bush Center. We've had some great conversations over the last 24 hours. They're going to continue this afternoon. We're going to have we're honoring Blaine Smith with our inaugural military service citation for his remarkable work in veteran leadership. We're also going to talk about the impact of veterans and military families. I tell you, for a guy that's a son of a soldier that landed in Normandy in 1944 and being able to go back there 51 years later and see that area and see the American cemetery. And actually, I was with my dad, and we actually met one of the individuals that was living in France at the time in a little family farm west of Paris in Rosenbrie. And the man came up to my father, and he said, my father said, "It sure is good to see you." And he said, "Well, it was good to see you 51 years ago when you came through here." And so it just, I mean, the feeling of it and the responsibility of America to extend and protect freedom all around the world. So I'm pleased to be able to talk about and at least introduce the military initiative military services initiative that we have here. And to discuss that further, I'm going to invite Doug Parker to the stage. He is the CEO of American Airlines, and we thank American Airlines for all of their great sponsorship of this. Doug is an example of a corporate leader that understands there's more than the bottom line to leadership. He, I know, has a company of 120,000 people, and 7,000 of them have served in the military in some kind of capacity. So, Doug, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. The President said he looked forward to my short remarks, so I got that encouragement. I'll try to do my best, sir. So, look, I am honored to be here at the Bush Center Forum on Leadership. Applaud the work that's being done. We need strong leadership today more than ever, so the work being done at the Bush Center is exceptionally important to our collective future. And I'm humbled to be on stage before Blaine Smith is awarded the Military Service Citation. I stand before you representing 120,000 incredible men and women at American Airlines that every day help more than 500,000 people travel around the world. More than 7,000 of those team members are active or retired military. It's an incredibly important part of our airline and who we are. In fact, one of the ways our team shows their leadership best is by supporting our military and veterans. Thousands of our team eagerly volunteer each year to support our marquee events like American Airlines Skyball and Snowball Express. And we're proud to honor and support our nation's heroes through the Medal of Honor Foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation, and of course the Bush Foundation's Military Services Initiative. It's an honor to work with such caring people, and it's an awesome privilege to be one of their leaders. And that's what I'd like to talk about, the awesome responsibility of leadership. Simon Sinek, the author of Leaders Eat Last, describes it well. He says, leadership is a responsibility. It's not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. He also says, we've confused rank and leadership. They're not the same thing. We all know people that sit at the highest level of an organization who are not leaders. We do as they say because they have authority, but we wouldn't follow them voluntarily. We also know many leaders who sit at mid-ranks and have no authority. And they've made a choice to look out for the people around them. And we would follow them anywhere. And that's what we're trying to build at American Airlines. A team of leaders that choose to look out for the people around them. Leaders that understand their responsibilities to create an environment that cares for our frontline team members. An environment where our team members go home at the end of the day feeling fulfilled because they know they made a difference. And because they work in an environment where they're appreciated and respected by leaders who genuinely care about them. Now, that's not easy in any company, and it's particularly difficult in the airline business because our history is quite different from that ideal. For decades, a struggling business model led to enormous industry losses, and bankruptcies were the norm. Airline employees took the brunt of that pain through layoffs, pay cuts, and benefit reductions. And with those broken promises comes mistrust. Now, through a lot of hard work and sacrifice, our industry is now healthy and long-term profitable. We're no longer living year to year, making decisions based on survival. We're focused on thriving and playing the long game. That requires an entirely different kind of leadership than the old world did. Every leader at American Airlines has been asked to take a leap of faith, to recognize that the world we knew no longer exists, to put the front line first and trust that if you take care of your team will take care of your customers, and that will take care of your stakeholders. And we need to rebuild trust by continuously doing trustworthy things over time. As a company, that's meant doing things we've never done before. In fact, that would be downright unheard of in the past in our industry. We've given our pilots and flight attendants pay increases several years before their contracts were due because they lagged their peers at other airlines. When negotiations were taking too long for some other groups, we implemented pay increases averaging 24% without asking for anything in return. We unilaterally restated a profit-sharing program for our team, not because we had to, but because our team told us it was the right thing to do, and we listened. We gave our team members each $1,000 as a result of the new tax bill, even though American Airlines doesn't pay cash taxes because of all those years of losses I talked about. But because we're playing the long game, we wanted our team to benefit from legislation that will benefit us eventually. So playing the long game requires much different leadership skills than the survival game did. The survival game is focused on management. It's about task, completing the day-to-day tactics of an operation. Leadership is about people, inspiring others to work together to accomplish more than they ever thought was possible. Now, those leadership skills don't just happen. They need to be taught and reinforced. We're sending everyone at American that has someone in their care, that's over 6,500 leaders, through a new leadership training program that focuses on skills like listening, empathy, and recognition. That's a big change for our team, but one we're excited about. The lives of our 120,000 team members and their families will be greatly enriched by this new type of leadership, and so, therefore, will be the experiences of our customers. We at American are looking to improve the world of our team members and customers through better and more caring leadership, a mission we share with the Bush Center. And we could use that same kind of leadership today in our public sector. And I believe that those of us in the private sector can and should help provide that leadership. There's been much written about the increasing partisanship of our public leaders, the polarization of our media outlets, and the growing divisiveness of our society. What I find most disturbing is our collective willingness to accept it. To be clear, the issues in our public sector seem to be tied to the structural environment as opposed to the leaders themselves. The vast majority of our congressional leaders are public servants who genuinely care about the greater good and have dedicated their lives to serving others. Unfortunately, though, they work in an environment that doesn't allow them to lead the same way all good business leaders do, through cooperation and compromise, healthy debate, and empathy for the other side. Instead, our public leaders operate in an environment where increasingly they must stay in line with their partisan base or risk not being elected again. And as we become more divided as a society, more funds flow to the more strident positions of each side, and the problem just continues to worsen. Talk to nearly any member of Congress today about important initiatives, and at some point, they will mention their frustration with the other side. Either they can't get their initiative through because the other side won't let them, or they're worried about how their peers will be portrayed by the other side if they choose to pursue a certain initiative. It doesn't matter which side one is on. Seemingly everyone is focused on, frustrated by, prone to blaming, and intent upon beating the other side. The result is demagoguery and dysfunction. There's more focus on competing against the other side than working together for the greater good, so the greater good suffers. Nice. And it's getting worse each year, not better. And we as a society complain about it, but we do nothing to truly reverse the trend. This behavior would never be tolerated in the commercial world. Any leader at American that stated they couldn't get their objectives completed because the other side wouldn't allow it wouldn't be in a leadership position very long. Make no doubt, we are intensely competitive in our business. I really dislike Delta Airlines and United Airlines. But there are many instances throughout the year where we competing airlines work together, because doing so helps our industry, and that's good for each of our teams. And business leaders can't be divisive. We have to pull people together. Our team members come from all races, religions, sexual orientations, nationalities, and political persuasions. And so do our customers. Our positions are rarely aligned with either of the political parties in total, but rather with different portions of each. So as we look to address our structural public leadership issues, our business community seems a logical place to look for leadership. The question is, how best can we make a difference? We tend to rally well and take a stand against positions that are clearly offensive to many of those in our care. Bathroom bills, travel bans, civil rights issues, including marriage equality, are all areas where strong business leadership has taken a stand and made a difference in recent years. Now, that's important work, and it needs to continue, and I suspect it will. I know it will from the leaders at American Airlines. But to really make a fundamental difference, our business community needs to figure out a way to provide the leadership that can begin narrowing the structural divide in the public sector. And that's a problem with no simple and obvious solution. But if we put our minds and resources together, we should be able to make some progress. For example, the annual revenues of the Fortune 500 are $12 trillion. So if each company contributed just 1/100th of 1% of our revenues to a fund, we could have $1.2 billion each and every year to contribute to candidates and causes that are closer to a commercially friendly agenda, socially progressive, fiscally conservative, globally minded. Not tied to any one side, but to candidates from either party who want to move further from their base and closer to a different agenda. The biggest problem we'd have initially would be finding candidates and causes to support, but that would surely correct itself over time. And look, that's just one idea and it may not even be workable. But if we come together to work on solutions, I'm confident we can make a difference. And in the meantime, the mantle's on us to be servant leaders to our own teams so that they in turn can show that leadership to others. So thank you for having me. Thank you for indulging my passions for leadership and for the people of American Airlines. And thank you to President Bush and the Bush Foundation for this leadership forum. It's important work at an important time. Thank you very much.
That was Doug Parker, CEO of American Airlines. He'll be stopping by to chat with us later. Here with us now is Holly Gordon, a 2015 Presidential Leadership Scholar who is Chief Impact Officer at Participant Media. I'm going to start with a quick video about Holly and then be back to chat with her in a minute.
What PLS allowed me to do was turn on the lights and have a map for how you lead change. Specifically, I have a much better sense for how to create a strategic plan. I have a much better sense for how to lead a team. I have a much better sense for how to think about my values and setting my visions and goals. I have a much better sense about how to persuade people. The frameworks and learning, the classroom learning at PLS was game-changing for me. So I'm currently the Chief Impact Officer for Participant Media, which is an entertainment company. We make film, television, and digital content. And at the core of each one of our pieces of content is a social message. And as Chief Impact Officer, my job is to create the strategy and execute campaigns around that content so that when people see our stories and are moved by them, they have an opportunity to take action and be leaders and change themselves. It was a great privilege to be in the presence of 59 other people who are dedicating their lives as servant leaders. I am grateful to the universe that upon completion of the PLS experience, I've landed in a job where I am working on some of the most important social issues of our time. And that given the content that we're creating that drives change and the PLS Rolodex, that in this job, when I combine the two together with my team and with my PLS colleagues, we are in the position to make incredible change around the world and across the country. And so I hope I can live up to that challenge, but I feel ready and grateful.
Thanks for stopping by the live desk, Holly.
My pleasure. I'm pleased to be here.
I bet some memories were flooding back when you watched that video of your time with in the inaugural class of Presidential Leadership Scholars.
As I watched that, I just thought, what an unbelievable experience I've had and how grateful I am. I mean, it's an unbelievable program.
How is it? How are the lessons? You were already an accomplished person when you were in that class in 2015. How did what you learned there and the network maybe that was formed there, how does that help you in your work today? How did it develop your leadership skills?
Well, I'm glad that you felt as though I was an accomplished person, but because I certainly felt that I sort of stumbled into a leadership role. I had an idea about how to make change with content, and I ran after that idea. And the challenge with that is that I never went to business school, and I had never done anything other than be a journalist. And so the bad news is if I didn't know how to do things like make a PowerPoint or give a presentation to a corporation, the good news is that I knew how to ask questions. And so what PLS helped me with is if my experience prior to PLS was building a campaign called Girl Rising, was all done by gut feel. PLS offered a whole set of case studies and frameworks and training about leadership as a skill, and also leading can be incredibly lonely. And PLS offered me an extraordinary opportunity to get to know 59 other people who are similarly bitten by the change the world bug, and have a safe place to share challenges, to ask for help, to learn about how others had accomplished different things in their lives. And then, of course, it has to be said that there is something incredible about being able to learn about leadership through the experiences of presidents and their administrations. And so just from a historical sense of what it means to be a leader in context, it's an unparalleled experience.
So how does that come into play as a storyteller with the films that you've made to bring about social change?
Well, in my new job, I work for an organization called Participant Media that was started by an entrepreneur, Jeff Skoll, who was a co-founder of eBay. Participant's mission is to use storytelling for change. So my background as a journalist is also rooted in the idea that stories can change people's perceptions of what is true and what is possible. And what Participant does is makes content, feature-length films, that tell really human stories about some of our biggest challenges today and encourage audiences to see the world in a new way, and then be inspired to make a difference, whether it be to work on issues of conservation or school reform, or just to see visible leaders and how visible leadership can transform a community and ultimately the world.
You know, our live stream viewers will be familiar with perhaps Waiting for Superman, certainly Spotlight, a number of other films that you've done, The Help and Lincoln, two more mainstream,
Yep.
I guess you would say films, although Spotlight was too. How do you choose which stories to tell?
Well, I'm a part of the greenlight process, and so we always have a robust conversation. Every story starts with a script and starts with narrative. And so my colleagues on the film side, one on the documentary side and one on the feature film side, are really experienced in understanding what narratives will hold an audience's attention. My contribution is this an issue that will live up to Jeff's mission, which is a more sustainable world of peace and prosperity? And how can we take this film to actually create impact around the world? So, for example, we have two films that we're working on now. One is looks at foster care, and one looks at race and opportunity when it comes to education in America today. And both of them, I'm pleased to say, are amazing, heartfelt, edge-of-your-seat, moving journeys, stories. But they also both, I'm pleased to say, have tremendous have a tremendous opportunity to drive change across the country, because they'll be able to catalyze proximate conversations, bring people together to see the content together and then have a conversation about, well, how are we going to now use this shared experience and shared understanding to make a change in our community.
Now, you were a journalist at ABC News. You worked at the Tribeca Film Festival. Then you took a little bit of a leap off the cliff, right? When you did Girl Rising and so what advice do you give to people who are maybe a little afraid to jump off that cliff when they have an idea and something they're passionate about?
Well, it's interesting because the leap off the cliff, nothing in my career has been particularly planned, except for the fact I've been very, very fortunate to be able to follow my intellectual curiosity. So, and I like new stuff. So that's in one box. The other box is that I also, around that time in my life, had two kids. And I had a husband who economically actually made more money. And so we wanted to be parents where our kids would see us more than a babysitter. Right. And so some of the professional choices I've made have been try new things because I want my job to fit my work, my life circumstances. So what I would say is that follow your gut, follow your passions, and then the great gift of journalism, ask lots of questions. Never be afraid to look stupid, because everyone starts as a beginner at some point.
And what I'm sure you mentor young professionals now, probably in and out of the entertainment business, but how has that, how has being a mentor informed the way your own leadership ability?
It's interesting. I think that what I always want my mentees to know is that I may look polished and like I know what I'm doing, but a lot of times I still don't know what I'm doing. And I definitely haven't known what I'm doing my whole life. That there is something to be said for experience. But I had a boss really, really early on who said to me, my first boss actually said, you know, Holly, if you can be a good assistant, you can be a good CEO. And I was like, you're just trying to make me feel better about taking messages for you. But what he really meant was that attention to detail, attention to punctuality, thinking ahead, keeping many, many different facets of a job organized. These are all skills that, and excellence, these are all skills that you can apply throughout a career. And so what I say to young people is, listen, focus on the ball that's in front of you and deliver your best results every single day, because that will keep opportunities coming your way.
Well, Holly, thank you for joining us at the Live Desk, and we'll look forward to the films that you mentioned coming up on foster care and race and equality and education.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Up next, we have a video about one of Holly's fellow 2015 Presidential Leadership Scholars, Will McNulty. You remember him.
I do. He's awesome.
He's a veteran who drew upon his personal transition to civilian life to establish International Disaster Relief Organization Team Rubicon Global. An amazing guy.
He is an amazing guy.
Team Rubicon is an idea that was founded in the immediate aftermath of the Haiti earthquake in January 2010. At the time, I had left the Marine Corps. I was wondering what the next chapter of my life was going to be, and the Haiti earthquake happened. Along with some firefighters and other Marines, led a medical team into Port-au-Prince, and we ended up being one of the very first response teams on the ground. When I first started PLS, Team Rubicon was just Team Rubicon USA. We hadn't launched Team Rubicon Global yet. It was actually during one of the modules in April of 2015 when the Nepal earthquake happened in Kathmandu. And that's when we launched Team Rubicon Global and subsequently Team Rubicon United Kingdom. I used the PLS experience to advance Team Rubicon by I think primarily the module strategic partnerships. Again, building those strong strategic partnerships with these country organizations around the world, recruiting their military veterans into our operation and deploying them into natural disasters. Effectively creating this global network that's all united under a common brand with a common mission.
I have seen a man with real passion and drive begin to understand how to manage and, dare I say, manipulate in order to get the right outcome for the collective good.
The veterans who serve with Team Rubicon regain a sense of purpose, a new community or peer-to-peer support system, a new sense of identity. Those are things that they lose after taking off the military uniform, and we give them back through continued service, this time through disaster response.
He is much improved in the way that he manages board members. He's already very articulate, but he has become much more astute in his interventions in order to achieve the right outcomes.
PLS inspired me to think about my own potential as a leader, because too often in our jobs we're siloed with individuals who think the same way that we do, are working towards the same objective, and PLS brings a diverse group of individuals who are going to challenge your perceptions, the ways you think about the world, and I think that's one of the true benefits of the program.
Up next, we're chatting with Natalie Ganella-Platz. She is the Deputy Director of the Women's Initiative here at the Bush Institute and runs our First Ladies Initiative. Welcome to the Live Desk, Natalie. Thank you for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
We also have to say in your introduction that you are the host of the popular Bush Center podcast, Ladies Comma First. So talk about that experience a little bit, about how fun it's been to take a subject that you're so passionate about, First Ladies, and actually bring it to thousands of people each week?
Well, what I think is most exciting about Ladies, First is the fact that it's actually the Bush Institute's inaugural podcast series. So this is really a new environment for us, and it's been really fun to be able to tell stories of how First Ladies themselves have really augmented our history and in a way that really has improved outcomes for key policy initiatives, for the presidency, and for wider society as a whole. We've told stories about Florence Harding, Jacqueline Kennedy. You know, we have these I think general narratives that we all are interested in, but what I love about the podcast is we have the opportunity to really pull back the screen and look at why it was so important and why it's an important model of women's leadership.
The First Lady is, of course, not elected. Why is it important to study them?
What I think is so interesting about the role of the First Lady is that it's actually apolitical. It's an apolitical function. You're not a member of civil society. You're not part of a government institution, which affords women and men in this position an incredible outlet to build the bridge and to foster dialogue and collaboration. And it's something we actually looked at in a research study we published last year entitled A Role Without a Rule Book. And this idea of building bridges and how you leverage this legitimacy gap. You're not elected, but you are official in ways that move the needle on important issues and ultimately improve lives.
Role Without a Rule Book, available, of course, at bushcenter.org. Well worth the read. It's an excellent publication. Now, you have lots of great stories about First Ladies that our live stream audience may not be familiar with. But let's pick someone, let's say Lou Hoover, for example, who doesn't get a lot of attention. But what's interesting about her in studying women's leadership?
Oh gosh, I could take up the rest of our time together talking about Lou Hoover, but you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people really overlook the significance of Lou Hoover, and not only as a First Lady, but as a pioneer of her era. I mean, she was the first woman in the United States to get a degree in geology, and both her and President Hoover were very much partners, and she was an innovator. She was so interested in new technology. For instance, she took basically the first color home movies ever captured in the White House. And our exhibit next door at the museum, First Lady Style of Influence, actually has her Kodak camera, and you can see these images in the National Archives online. But Lou Hoover also, you know, for her era, early 20th century, was a champion for girls. I mean, she became very involved in the Girl Scouts before she was First Lady. She encouraged First Ladies like Edith Wilson and others to take up the cause. And since 1917, our First Lady has served as the honorary president of the Girl Scouts. And it's an enduring legacy, and she recognized during her era that it was important to have champions for girls, and it was important to, you know, elevate things like gender equality, which still were very taboo.
We had really an extraordinary panel yesterday on women's empowerment and leadership, moderated by Maria Bartiromo, that featured Barbara Barrett and Dina Powell, two phenomenally accomplished women with fascinating stories. But what was your a couple takeaways from that discussion that hit you?
Well, first and foremost, I think it was fantastic that this was the first piece of content at this forum on leadership. And I think at a time when women's stories and the value of women's leadership are getting the attention they deserve, I can't think of a better topic to kick off our inaugural forum on leadership. And what I found what was most interesting about the panel was the emphasis on role models, both men and women who, you know, really are pushing forward to ensure that we have a more inclusive society in many facets, both in looking at gender, but also other marginalized groups. And what was fascinating, I think, is to be able to hear from women who have dedicated a good part of their lives to these issues, but in a broader context, and making that connection directly to policy, making that connection directly to really creating more prosperous societies, I think, is important. And I appreciated that during the conversation, all three women really underscored the value of action. We can talk about these issues all day long, but until we have action, and action in sustainable ways, we will not see change. And so it was just, again, fantastic to start this forum with this topic, and I hope that it inspires further work that we do here at the Bush Institute and that many of our partners carry forward through their own efforts.
Well, speaking of action, the point of A Role Without a Rule Book was to help First Ladies, the Office of First Ladies in other countries even, understand how to best use the platform to help improve their countries, for their citizens. So talk about that a little bit, about putting the policy work into action even overseas.
Well, for our viewers that may not be familiar with our First Ladies Initiative, we support first spouses globally in using their platform to essentially change lives. And one of the things that I think is unrecognized about the role of First Lady is it is one without a rule book. There's no job description. And we place, especially on women, huge assumptions, expectations in this role, and yet they have few resources to execute on the change that needs to happen. So through our work, we are supporting First Ladies through workshops, advisor trainings, collaborative efforts to really move the needle on issues of importance, largely for women and girls, but issues that impact society more broadly. And so, you see that in our report, you see it across our program work, and I think what is so integral to our program work, as well as the collaborative engagement we have with various partners. We're not going to be able to do this alone, and across this forum, across our work, across the Bush Institute as a whole, you really see this push for partnership, and we can't work in silos.
The style of influence, you mentioned the First Lady's special exhibit now running through October here at the Bush Center. What should people look for when they come to visit?
So I think going back to this unfortunate prevailing narrative about First Ladies, we seem to fixate on the surface. And so most people would expect to see dresses and fashion, and our exhibit very much celebrates the legacy and leadership of these women,
right,
the way they have changed our country and history for the better. And I hope people will stop by and see the exhibit. As you said, runs through October 1st, and I hope they'll visit bushcenter.org /podcast so that we can continue the conversation there.
You mentioned the Lou Hoover camera. What are some of the other artifacts in this special exhibit that you most enjoy?
I love that we have one of Eleanor Roosevelt's radios. What most people don't know is that she actually, and a story that I try to tell whenever I can, is that she was actually the first person to address the country after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And I think it very much demonstrates her role as a partner, not only to the president, but to the American people. And during that speech, she essentially appealed to women and young people who were instrumental in U.S. engagement and the eventual outcomes that we saw at the end of World War II. And I thought it was incredible that she was able to leverage her own experience, the fact her sons were serving, the fact that she was a woman in a position of influence, to really speak to key populations at a very tumultuous time in history. And
not unlike Mrs. Bush in 9/11.
Correct. So Mrs. Bush actually was the first person to speak to the American people after the attack on 9/11. And so it's a great parallel across decades, but I think it really speaks to the importance of this role and the way women have really leveraged this opportunity that has no job description in ways that have had such positive influence, both in good times and bad. And I hope people come away from this exhibit, come away from our podcast, come away with the broader understanding of our work, with a new recognition for the value of this role and really the importance of women in positions of influence more broadly.
We just have a few seconds left, but how, in your scholarly study of First Ladies, how will Mrs. Bush, Mrs. Barbara Bush, who we're remembering this week with our white ribbons, how will she be remembered as the First Lady?
When I think of Barbara Bush, for me, I think of authenticity. And we had the incredible opportunity to interview her, and I think every interview you've seen, all of her initiatives, the support she had for her family, and really the role of matriarch. I mean, she is an authentic human being, and I think she's an incredible representation of what inspired principled leadership looks like. And her legacy will live on, and she has inspired so many. And really these points of light that have spread across the world.
She's extraordinary. Well, thank you, Natalie, for coming by the live desk. It's great talking to you. Everybody, go to bushcenter.org for all the great materials, including the video from yesterday's panel. Michael Van Valkenburg designed the Texas landscape we enjoy here at the Bush Center. Yesterday, he spoke at our panel on conservation with Mrs. Laura Bush and stopped by the live desk to chat with us while he was here. So let's take a look at that conversation. Michael, thanks so much for joining us here at the Forum on Leadership live desk.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you had worked with Mrs. Bush prior to designing the landscape in the native Texas park. But when she came to you for this project, what was her vision? What were the requirements? And where did you find inspiration to deliver such a magnificent result?
Well, one of my favorite things about the Bush presidency was the obvious connection that he and Laura Bush had to the Texas landscape. So I wasn't surprised when we were commissioned to do the library for them that the idea that this should be some special reflection on the landscape of Texas, not just the way that it looks, but the kind of ecological significance of it and the frugality of it with respect to energy conservation.
Well, it's clearly it's beautiful, but it's also sustainable. What techniques did you use and innovations perhaps to pull that off?
I would say that the most innovative thing that we've done here to connect the appearance of the place with its ecological value is the way we've harvested water from the site. There's an elaborate system of like, for example, in the parking lot across the street, there are no curbs. Anytime it rains, the water all runs, sheet drains into a central runnel and then directs itself to a water storage tank. And I'm sure you've recognized in the park we made, there's no artificial, no decorative use of water. The only place there's water is the stone seep, where very slowly after a storm event, water trickles through the wall and it creates a special microclimate and several days where you can see the moisture.
Right. Also means we're not dependent on city water, which is
not at all.
Yeah,
right.
Which is another good thing. Now, for our viewers, our live stream viewers, can they use any of these approaches in their own backyard projects at home?
I think literally everything that we've done here can be used in the backyard, but I want to start by saying the most important thing is to assume the appreciation of the landscape and the idea that it has its own aesthetic that that Mrs. Bush and the president brought to the project. Mm-hmm. In other words, I'm saying that when you apply these principles to your own landscape at home, it's not going to look like a suburban lawn, with irrigation. It's going to have an entirely different feel, a Texas feel.
Right, and a sustainable feel. So
completely.
That's right. You're working on an interesting project in Detroit right now, more of an inner city type of a project. When you take something like that on, how do you consider the history of the place and the community that you're in? Tell us about that.
Well, history can be a single word, or it can be histories. And I think one of the mistakes we make when we talk about history is that we can sometimes think that you just go back to a single moment. Well, you have to think of the whole span of history. And in Detroit, we went back to why Detroit was even built there, and that was the dependence of the region and the enormous opportunity that all the fresh water of Michigan gave to the site. Our park site is actually on the Detroit River, and it's just this amazing resource. And then we started thinking about how people used water in Detroit and what the history of engagement with water was, both through parks that Olmsted had created and then later things. And we just kind of worked our way forward to understand the city's relationship to water over time.
Interesting. Now, the reason you're here is because conservation is one of the topics at this week's Forum on Leadership here at the Bush Center. Where are we? What is the state of conservation and that dialogue in our country today?
Well, I hope it's racing forward. It needs to be. The world, one very interesting fact for you, almost every tree that's in the landscape here is a native tree. Mm-hmm. When we started planning the project, which was 10, 12 years ago, while the president and first lady were still in the White House, actually, so, it's quite a while. We have 2 terms of Obama and then, the remainder of their term, and then the current the current president, there were like 12 native trees readily available in the nursery trade. I mean, you could maybe find them obscurely, but we have scores of native trees in cultivation now. So it's a minor example, but I see us moving significantly towards that. I think it's a change of aesthetic, but people are conscious that a choice of tree can affect water conservation, water consumption, but also the wrong tree can have disease and insect pests that then are expensive to spray and have residual and unhealthy effects in the water table and the surrounding landscape. And I think we're all kind of moving away from wanting to have that kind of exposure.
Last thing I wanted to ask you, I know you come back periodically, and when you come back and you see people using the Native Texas Park, pushing strollers, jogging, walking their dogs, I mean, really the community is using this. And when you look around, I mean, how do you feel about it 5 years later when you visit?
I feel great. I was here a couple weeks ago working on something for the Trinity River Project, and I had time to shoot over here from downtown, and I wanted to see it just as spring was breaking out, which is, you know, no matter where you live in America, the arrival of spring is an awesome thing. I was here early, and you know, nobody knew who I was as just another person roaming around. And you know, it made me remember what Mrs. Bush said in the beginning, was she didn't want this to be a place that was a landscape around the presidential center. She wanted it to be a gift to the city and to SMU and to the surrounding neighbors. And that was exactly how it felt. It felt like this cool, you know, neighborhood park that people were enjoying. And in the end, that's what's really important.
Well, thank you for stopping by the Live Desk.
Sure.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
5 years later.
Thank you.
And really an incredible job. Well done.
Thank you. We were honored to do this project.
Thank you.
Good.
That was Michael Van Valkenburg, President and CEO of Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. You can check out the panel on conservation he participated in yesterday at bushcenter.org. Up next, we have my interview with Jonathan Swanson, co-founder and executive chairman of Thumbtack. Swanee served on the President Bush's National Economic Council. So let's take a look at the interview. Jonathan, it's great to see you again. Thanks for
having me.
Thanks for spending some time at the Live Desk.
Excited to be here.
I got to take you back to January 20th, 2009. You and I had worked together in the White House. We're at Andrews Air Force Base. President Bush is about to jet off to Midland to begin his new life. As I was leaving, I ran into you, and I said, Swanee, you were 25 years old at the time. I was much older than that. And I said to you, Swanee, what are you going to do? And you told me, I'm going to go to Thailand.
That's right.
I'm going to lay on the beach for a couple weeks, and I'm going to think of an idea. And that idea was Thumbtack. So
that's right.
Tell our live stream viewers how that happened and a little bit about Thumbtack.
Yeah, so worked in the White House for a few years, and my boss at the White House was Al Hubbard, who is a fellow entrepreneur, and he in part inspired me to go look for my own business to start. And so I spent a year with my partners thinking about different ideas for different businesses we could start, and it culminated on that beach in Thailand. And we had lots of idiotic ideas over the years, but eventually we came back to local services as this just huge part of the world. It's how customers spend lots of money, very integral in our lives. When you get married or you move to a new home, you need local services. But the more we looked at it, the more local services looked big, important, but also so old and broken. And so we started Thumbtack with the mission of helping customers hire any sort of local professional. So whether you need a handyman for your home, a DJ for a party, a tutor for your child, we've got 1,000 different types of pros all over the country. And our mission for professionals is to help anyone with a skill start and run their own small business. We think the world is full of talented people who could be aspiring small business owners, and we want to help them all start their own small business on Thumbtack.
Now, this may say a lot about my limited abilities as a handyman, but I am a devoted Thumbtack app user.
Thank you.
And this is also good for local and small businesses.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have 200,000 small businesses who have started or built their small business on Thumbtack today. those small businesses have earned over $1 billion a year in our platform, which is something we're really excited about. But we think the gap from where we are to where we can be is so much greater, right? There's tens of millions of people we believe should be starting their own small business, and our mission is to pull down all the barriers that stand between someone's dream of starting a small business and them actually bring it to life.
You had to raise a lot of money to make this happen. How did you do that? What obstacles did you have to overcome along the way?
100 obstacles. So the first time we went to raise money was in the fall of 2011. Went out to raise $4.5 million, pitched 42 investors, got 42 no's. Over the course of these 4 months of pitching 42 investors and getting 42 no's, 8 of 9 of our employees were on no salary. Our founders were on no salary for over a year. Bank account hit zero. This was a really trying, frustrating, scary time. You know, I thought we didn't know if we'd make it, but we stuck it out and eventually found an investor who's willing to bet on us. And that gave us more time to really develop more of the product, find a business model. You know, and fast forward a few years later, we raised a few $100 million from Google Capital and Sequoia. We've now been able to hire hundreds of a team of over 1,000 around the world. But we had to go through some real struggle and ups and downs.
What kept you going? And this is before Uber, so the gig economy wasn't as
right.
well known. What kept you going through those times of getting no salary and tough times?
You know, well, we didn't know what else to do, so we just had to keep working on it. But it was also, you know, it felt like we had walked into the desert. We had walked in 100 miles, and there's no turning back at this point. And I think we also had this conviction that someone was going to build an Amazon for local services, right? I don't know about you, but I get a package from Amazon every week, and we felt like that same phenomenon was going to happen for the whole world of services. And if it wasn't us, someone else was going to build a really generational company that would help lots of people, help people start small businesses. And we thought, man, if we fail and we have to watch someone else build that business, that's going to be so painful. And so we just stuck it out and eventually had some lucky breaks and got on to go and build bigger things.
Well, these are great lessons, too, for aspiring entrepreneurs. So hopefully people will be inspired by hearing you tell your story. So, Swanee, thank you again for joining us on the live desk.
My pleasure. Great to be here. Thank you.
That was Jonathan Swanson, co-founder and executive chairman of Thumbtack. He participated on the Next Gen Game Changers panel yesterday. You can check it out at bushcenter.org. Now we're taking you to our interview with Lila Koestani, who will participate in our panel on veteran leadership in a few minutes. Lila is also a member of our inaugural class for the new Stand 2 Vet Leadership Initiative. Lila, thanks for stopping by the Forum on Leadership live desk. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You have an incredible personal story, and I'll tell our viewers on the live stream, you've got to tune in to the Veteran Leadership panel coming up to hear the full story. But the short version is your family immigrated to the U.S. when you were 3 years old.
Yes. And
through a series of events, you ended up joining the Navy.
Yes.
Where you served as a surface warfare and intelligence officer. Mm-hmm. Well, tell us a little bit about your career and how that led you to start your nonprofit.
Sure. So I initially came into the military as a surface warfare officer. So I was a ship driver out of Sasebo, Japan on an amphibious ship. So I spent a lot of time with the Marines out at sea. I actually really enjoyed being a surface warfare officer. But when I came into the military, it was in May of 2001. And of course, with the events of September 2001 and being from Afghanistan and being able to speak the language and understanding the culture, I felt like I could do more in the military and serving the U.S. as an intelligence officer. So I quickly ended up asking for a lateral transfer and going into the intel community. And after my very first deployment in Afghanistan, I just fell in love with the intel community and working with the special ops community as well. And because of that, I wanted to keep working with that community, and I couldn't do it in the Navy. So unfortunately, I basically picked the wrong service to be able to keep going to Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is landlocked, not a lot of ships, not a lot of water in Afghanistan. And so I had to leave the Navy in order to continue working with the special operations community. And ever since having left the Navy in 2007, I've continued to go to Afghanistan to support our mission out there. And when I was there during my last deployment, which was in 2014, I met a lot of really wonderful women who were working in the special ops community, who had done many deployments overseas, both Iraq, Afghanistan, other theaters of war, and they were planning on leaving the military. And it was a little disheartening. I remember my own journey and not wanting to leave, and many of them cited the same anecdotal reason, and it was because they didn't feel like they had the male champions and sponsors that they needed in a highly male-dominated space to be able to advance as leaders. And that led to the creation of our nonprofit, which is Promote, and we're very much focused on getting the male leaders in the special ops community to champion for diversity and inclusion. They are the best messengers.
Right. Are they willing?
They're very willing. They're very willing. It's one of the things about the military that's really great, but it can also work against you, is that the military tells us what to do and they expect us to figure it out.
Right.
And when it comes to issues like harnessing the diversity on your teams and cognitive diversity especially, and championing women, we don't know how to do those things inherently. And it does require education and training and very frank discussions. And so as we've reached out to the senior leaders, the men in the special ops community, they've been on board. And
how is leadership development different for someone who's been through special ops training and that work?
Well, they get a lot of leadership development, of course, at a very young age and very early on in their careers, but they're largely working with other men. So if you're a Navy SEAL or you're a Green Beret, up until just a couple of years ago, there were no women that could join your ranks. And so they have a wonderful ability to lead other men and to champion for other men. They're working alongside them day in and day out. They're deployed with them day in and day out. And they create these really meaningful bonds, both at work and outside of work. But we can't pretend in the U.S. military that we are not also dealing with the same issues that everyone is dealing with across U.S. society right now when it comes to issues of Me Too, the issues of Time's Up. We need to have these conversations in the military as well, that in as much as our ranks are very diverse all across the board, at the leadership levels, who are the people that are running the military? They are largely men. And if they're not stepping up and championing for women and making sure that they have a seat at the table, there are not enough women to mentor other women.
So you're doing that through your nonprofit Promote,
yes,
which you founded, but you're also taking steps to improve your own leadership skills by applying to be in the first class of the Bush Institute Stand 2 Veteran Leadership program. So congratulations on being selected. I know it was selected. I know it was a highly competitive process. So what do you hope to get out of the program, and why did you apply, given the fact that you're already pretty accomplished on the leadership front?
Well, thank you, but I don't think that journey ever ends. And when I read about successful leaders and what they credit to their success, many of them talk about the fact that they've never stopped learning and never stopped growing and continue to challenge themselves. And why I wanted to apply to this program is because I have followed the Bush Center for several years. I have a couple of really good friends who have gone through the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program and have spoke very highly about the experience and specifically the Bush Center's role in it. And as I look at how much effort is being placed on empowering women at the Bush Center and bringing together diverse viewpoints, that was really important to me, as I didn't want to be surrounded by people who thought exactly the same way that I did. And so when I read through the Stand 2 application process and the fact that they were not just looking for veterans, but also non-veterans.
Right.
And people from across all sectors of society, to me, there was absolutely no reason not to apply to this program, because I knew that I would be challenged to think differently, and I would be a part of a really diverse cohort.
Please give us a quick recap, a little sneak peek for our live stream audience of what they can expect on the panel.
It's going to be a dynamic panel. Colonel Howe has some really great questions teed up for us, and I think what I'm most excited about is being able to talk about, in as much as there's a lot that the rest of the country can do to support veterans, veterans themselves need to take that initiative and continue to be leaders across all sectors of society. And we have benefited a great deal over the last few years with as much attention as has been paid to veterans and our service. But ultimately, everything that's out there, we still have to go and grab it.
Well, thank you for your service to our country and continued success with Promote, your nonprofit. Thanks, Lila, for joining us, and we'll look forward to the panel. That was Lila Koestani, president and co-founder of the nonprofit Promote. She'll participate in the veteran leadership panel in just a few minutes. Earlier today, I had the chance to sit down with Secretary Don Evans, who's also chairman of the Bush Foundation Board. We had a fascinating conversation on leadership. Let's go to that interview now. Secretary Don Evans, thank you for stopping by the Forum on Leadership Live Desk.
Absolutely, Sully. Glad to do it.
One of the themes of the Forum on Leadership is my charge to keep. We see the hashtag being used on social media. Of course, that was President Bush's campaign book when he ran for president years ago. And what does that mean, charge to keep, mean to you and your president?
Yeah, Shelley, look, first of all, thanks for all you do around here. I mean, it's people like you and this team that he attracts, and because of the individual he is and the people that, you know, love the guy and believe in him and are inspired by his style of leadership. But the charge to keep is it's certainly a very important part of this whole journey. As I look back on our journey together over the last 23 years, we sung that hymn in the First United Methodist Church in Austin, Texas in 1995 on Inauguration Day. And the message of that theme, of that hymn, is a powerful message that I think has driven both of us for the last 23 years because in our public service. He took that theme, and it's also part of a painting that hung in the office in the Capitol, and while he was governor, it hung in the office of the Oval Office while he was President of the United States. But it was a hymn written by Charles Wesley in 1762. And you think about that, that was 14 years before the Declaration of Independence. It was 25 years before the Constitution. And it was a country at that time that was wrestling with what it really wanted to be. Could this be a country that was governed by the people? Could it be a republic that was governed by the people? And you know what? They decided to have this great political and I would say spiritual experiment to see if we could have a republic that was governed by the people. And what that meant, though, was the leaders of the country, the citizens of the country, had to be people of a strong moral compass, had to be people that had the right kind of values, the right kind of virtues, because only if you had people that were working together with the moral compass and the values and virtues could this great experiment be successful. In fact, there's the story about Ben Franklin walking out of Constitution Hall and the day he signed the Constitution, and he was asked, do we have a republic or do we have a monarch? And he said, well, we have a republic if you can keep it. And so that's just, the hymn itself is about, we all have a higher calling, a higher purpose to serve. It is about saving one soul at a time. We've kind of heard the theme some, well, yesterday we heard Condi Rice talking about, you know, the importance of a compassionate government. On the front of the wall of the Institute, we believe in free markets and that are humanized by a compassionate government. And so, you know, when I think about kind of our journey together over the last 23 years and his style of leadership and what grounds him, he's grounded by his service of a higher calling.
Right. And that's the principal leadership that he exhibited as governor and as president with you at his side for many of those decisions. So how does the charge to keep that about serving a cause greater than yourself relate to decision making and leadership?
Well, look, you've got to be, when you're making the toughest of decisions, you have to be grounded in core fundamental principles, because you got to be thinking about kind of, you know, what you think about as a leader is you think about what's in the best long-term interest for the general well-being of the people that you're serving.
Right.
And you got to be anchored with basic fundamental values and basic fundamental virtues. Is we're all here to serve you and make your life better. And so when you think about it in that kind of way, it's not like what's going to make me more popular or what's going to, you know, it's got to be grounded in a kind of a spiritual kind of principle or a value kind of principle that really anchors your thinking. And, you know, I always said about the president while he was in office, you know, talking about the power of the office. It's the most powerful office in the world. But you know what? There's even a higher office than that he worships. He doesn't worship the power of the office of the presidency. He worships a higher calling, and so that enables him to be grounded in the right kind of values and make the toughest of decisions.
Well, and we heard Dr. Rice say last night that we're Americans first. Mm-hmm. And as the country is somewhat divided right now, this notion of it not being about any one person, you know, you would think would be, this is a leadership style that never goes out of style.
Right.
You know, and talk about how important it is today to you know, with the times that we're in now to have that higher calling.
Well, you know, I think that gets us back to our founding fathers, right, and what they wanted and the struggles of the country at that moment. And it certainly is, it kind of gets us back to our roots, if you will. Right. I mean, when you look back at this country and you look back at freedom, there's a saying called the Golden Triangle. And the Golden Triangle is, in order to have freedom, you have to have people of virtues and values. In order to have virtues and values, you have to have faith. And in order to practice your faith, you have to have freedom. Right. So it's freedom and values and virtues. Right. And so, you know, when you make the toughest of decisions, if you go back to some of those basic values that we learn through our faith and learn in our spiritual life, it is what enables you to make, you know, tough calls.
And what do you think? You know, you're also the chairman of the board of the Bush Foundation, which, you know, runs this place. We're 5 years in now. What do you think when you come here and you see an event like this, for what's happened here, and again, connected to those values and principles?
Well, I think it's we're going to still be talking about those values, because I think those are enduring values that you want to see this country carry forward with for years to come. I mean, you know, this country, in order to be successful, has to have leaders with a strong moral compass. Mm-hmm. It has to have citizens that have those values and virtues. And there has to be a trust between them, between the leaders and the citizens. And I would say that trust and that moral compass